Hello, everyone. Hopefully I'm coming through loud and clear for everyone on the YouTube side. Yes, we made it. Sorry, we're a little late. Just, I don't know, for some reason, YouTube just didn't like the stream coming in from our Zoom session here. So that's okay. We've got that sorted out. Hey, folks, I can see you all saying hello in the chat. Thank you very much for letting me know that it's all good. Hey, Ashley, yes, we'll introduce you to him in a minute. Thanks very much, everyone. So yeah, we'll definitely kick off into my usual preamble, and in the meantime, we should hopefully see everyone jumping in and ramping up the current concurrent viewers numbers that I can see here at the moment. It's sort of doubling every 5 or 10 seconds, so that's a good way to bring everyone in. Everyone's gotten the alert and the link, and we'll get everyone introduced. So awesome. Thanks very much for joining us again. We've had a couple of false starts there, just trying to organize and get all the speakers in and get everything sorted as well. So yeah, thanks for your patience with that. We definitely are in need of your support in terms of talks and things, especially since we're trying to go back to in person, and that's kind of a spoiler alert. We definitely want to try and organize some in-person events, get the usual drinks and pizza thing going on, and some networking time. So that's we'll try and make sure we can handle the logistics and sponsorship before that time. But yeah, that we're going to need speakers. If we got nobody to actually go and present at BrisJS, we're really not going to have a great time just bringing everyone there and and just sort of going, hey, anyone got any lightning talks? Which back in the day we did when we were first starting off, but we definitely like to be prepared and give everyone the heads up about what exactly we can bring. But yeah, I'll jump into the slide deck and get everyone introduced to, if you haven't attended a BrisJS live stream before, introduced to the format. So the one thing that we use quite a bit is Slido, and that's a good way just to kind of concentrate and centralize all of the different questions and points of feedback that you might have as an audience. So we try and bring that all together under Slido. So feel free to jump on there, use code 333 this time, not 222. 222 was taken by somebody else, how dare they? So we're able to jump on that one. You can use the QR code if you've got a mobile device handy and you're watching on something different. Yeah, otherwise, yeah, feel free to jump on that. If for some reason you can't juggle it and you do still want to leave us a question or a remark, feel free to use the YouTube chat. It's open there. And we'll see it on about a 3-second delay there, I think. And so, yeah, I'll ferry those questions over then to the Slido. I'll just do my admin thing here in the background. But yes, no, please definitely raise any of the questions or any of the feedback that you have for any of the presenters. We'll grab all those together and then do a bit of a Q&A session after their talk. And each speaker's talk will have that Q&A session. So yeah, definitely take the opportunity. And yeah, I'll jump into the next one. So I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the site, which I'm broadcasting on from today, which is the Yugara and Bundjalung people, and also like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. And it's an ADOC week, so definitely go and check that out. It's at nadoc.org.au. There's a whole bunch of info, and there's a bunch of competition. There's like award winners there as well, so that you can kind of get some info on as well. So there's a lot happening this week, and I know a lot of the different local radio stations are featuring Indigenous art and music as well. There's a lot of things going on in ADOC week, so definitely check it out there as well. The other shout out is for Meetup, which is just at the moment where we're organizing a lot of the announcements through, and sort of gives me a platform to be able to do email outs in case we change any of the dates and times or any of the info. We try and make sure that we've at least give people the weekend to see some of the details about the speaker talks. I'm trying to get those out, at least mid-month from now on as well, given that we can try and organize speakers ahead ahead of time. So if you know you'd love to jump in a particular month, the earlier the better. That way we can get the announcements out to everyone. Yeah, outside of that, this is the usual reminder that it's a harassment-free experience. That includes online. So any of our chat methods or any of the, for example, Slido or anything like that, all falls under the idea of our code of conduct. So please check that out. Make sure that you're all good with that. And we obviously also want to jump into what I was alluding to before, is we have a call for presenters every single time. It's absolutely crucial. So this is the lifeblood of any meetup, but certainly BrisJS. We rely on the kindness of strangers, which is here to present a talk. But also, if you're not ready to present a talk, but you've got a specific topic that you'd really love to see, you can also help the community by just putting up your request. So you can request a talk by sort of saying, hey, I've got a topic that I'd love to see somebody with knowledge on it kind of come forward with. That's happened a couple of times where folks have really wanted to be able to present and be able to prepare a presentation, have actually gone and looked on the list of things that are kind of considered ideas then, and picked that up and actually created a presentation about it. So that's another option too. But yes, please, we love to be able to support people to, especially if it's your first time, take the stage and, do a little presentation of any length. We have lightning talks of around 10 minutes or 15 minutes, we, do 15 to 20 minute normal talks, and 30-minute, 40-minute sort of feature length talks headliner talks that we try and put in every BrisJS month as well. So yeah, we're absolutely keen to get you involved, and please reach out. There's a present link at brisjs.org, but I always tweet out a particular little template-y link. Our YouTube channel has, on the landing page for the YouTube channel also has a link to submit your talk. So you can grab links wherever you find them, whatever your platform is. And you can also visit us on our GitHub Issues page. This is where ultimately people put their talk volunteering or their requests. You can see it's tagged with as such. This is an old screenshot, but the format remains the same. You can directly go into BrisJS GitHub Issues and submit there as well. So ultimately we kind of corral it through there, tag it with the links, and organize it within like a release, and we make sure that's part of each month. If you're keen to see who's already pre-scheduled and you kind of don't want to wait for my rather late announcements, usually through the month, you can always check that out there and see who's coming up. There's also a number of different socials. Twitter is still kind of the main active one where we kind of broadcast out when things are coming up quickly, but obviously you're on the YouTube channel. That one's the active place to be at the moment while we're running these things as live streams. And occasionally there's Facebook posts that might come through. We also have the messages turned on as well. If you wanted to be able to chat, jump in there and send me a message or anything like that, feel free to do that on any of the platforms. I'm happy to engage with everyone. BrisJS.org is kind of a rallying point with some links, as I mentioned, and it kind of serves as a bit of an initial destination. We've also got the job board that's on there, which is probably one of the most useful pieces of that, which actually goes and aggregates some of the posts that we accept on our GitHub issues and presents them in this web page format. So you'll see, a number of different jobs that you and your, fellow members of industry have gone and put up. We try and make sure that this is kind of a, refer a friend to come and work with me style place. So we try and accept those in as often as possible, and we've had lots of different folks be able to pick up different jobs through here as well, which is always very, very good. That's it. That's enough for me. So yeah, if you're in, just to follow on from that last slide, if you've got a position open that you want to be able to share with everyone, feel free to send a GitHub issue there, and I'll tag it appropriately so it appears on our site. If you're in need of a job, go check out that site. That page will aggregate all of them, and you can use the GitHub issues to actually engage with and reply to the folks who've posted the job as well, in case they didn't leave any links or any contacts to kind of pursue those positions. So without further ado, we've got a couple of different talks tonight. So Ashley Davis, carryover champ extraordinaire of BrisJS, is here with JavaScripting from the terminal, running our headline talk, and he'll be able to take us through all the different tricks you can perform with your computer's terminal when it comes to be able to processing files and parsing JS in different sort of batch queries or any kind of command line arguments. And then we've got the also carryover champ, Adam. He's coming back and teaching us about adding user extensibility to your web apps. So we're really glad to have him on the show tonight as well. So to take it away, I will invite Ashley to unmute and unvideo himself. There we go. I'll stop my share so we can see your face. How are you doing, Ash?
Oh, I'm good, thank you, Kevin. How are you?
I am well. I am glad to have BrisJS back up and going in front of everyone's faces tonight. Yeah, look, I'm keen to hear about JavaScripting in the terminal. I know I've done a couple of utility style things, but I'm always keen to pick up some new tricks from you. So please take it away, my friend.
Hopefully you haven't too oversold it.
No, look, this stuff can be really handy in a pinch, and especially if you're creating, back-end services and things like that as well. So yeah, no, there's definitely lots to learn here as well.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Kevin. Hi, everyone. My name's Ashley Davis, and tonight I'm going to be giving you a live demonstration of working with data from the terminal using a toolkit that I created called DataKit, and that I'm still using it quite regularly as well. It's proving very useful. So I'm very happy I put in the effort to kind of make like an actual toolkit out of it, which can be, quite a daunting job. And Kevin, I'm looking forward to getting back together face to face as well. But tonight I'm also kind of grateful that, I didn't really have to go out on such a cold winter's night.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before we get started, I'm just going to give a little bit of background on, how I got to this spot and where I created DataKit to help me do my data transformations. I started a new job a few months back for a startup called Deployable. And I needed to get into the database and just ask and answer questions like about the data that we have, like really fundamental stuff that I just didn't know because I was new. And also, we're a startup running lean. So there isn't really anyone else to ask the question to. You kind of have to actually look at the data and figure out what's there. And the kind of questions I was asking is just really basic stuff like how many users do we have? And who is paying for the product versus who is using the free version? And, what features of our product are people actually using, versus the ones that are just sitting there that people don't care about? So I had these sort of questions, and I went about writing some custom code to pull data from the database. And then, I was using Node.js and JavaScript, and doing data transformations, filtering the data, merging different tables together, stuff like that to get the information that I needed. And that process, which honestly I seem to kind of do for every company, like every time I start a company and I'm asking these questions, I'm like writing custom code to do it. And so I've done that for a long time, like working with data, writing code to do that. That's cool. But it sort of inspired me as well as like, isn't there a better way to do this from the command line? And I did investigate using JQ, which I'll talk about a little bit later if you've heard of that. And it didn't really do it for me. And so I just had this kind of epiphany of what it would look like, my toolkit. And so I already had the name DataKit. It used to be just like a JavaScript API. And I started adding the kinds of commands into that I needed. And I just didn't stop. I just over the last few months, I've just added a ton of commands. There's some more commands I still want to add, but I've got a really good demo to show tonight, and it's really, really useful actually. So how am I going to play this tonight? I'm going to start by jumping straight into a really basic demonstration, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to show you the GitHub page for it, and I'll show you how to install it and talk to you about some of the other commands that are there. And then I'm going to do a much more complex demonstration. So that might be a little bit hard to follow, but I just want to show you like where you can go, like the power of this toolkit and how it can be kind of chained together, pipeline on the command line to go through, multiple data transformation steps and to get the end result that you want. So let me just get set up. I'm just going to start my timer too, just to make sure I don't go too far over time. So I'm just starting off at the terminal here. I'm on Windows 11 using Windows Terminal, but this also works on Linux and Mac OS. I'm just trying to get the zoom controls out of my way. There we go. So this should work for you on any operating system, the exact same kind of thing that I'm doing. I'm actually in the DataKit repo, and all the data that I'm using, I've got a bunch of example data here, a bunch of JSON files, users, sales, products. You can kind of guess hopefully what's in those. And I've got some more interesting data to show you a bit later as well. That's all in the repo. So if you clone the GitHub repo, which I'll show you on GitHub a bit later, you can get this data yourself and you can have a bit of a play with it. Let's have a look at what's in users.json. So let's just print that out. So there's a bunch of JSON data here for users. These aren't real users, of course. I'm not giving away any proprietary information or, secret customer lists or anything like that. I actually generated this data using ChatGPT, which is like an interesting story all on its own. I got it to generate 20 kind of randomized users, and I got it to generate some information on products that we might be selling, and also how many of those products we're selling and to which users, that kind of thing. So just sort of like a basic data set. That might be something that comes from your database. You kind of have to imagine that this is where that's coming from, our company's database. And we might want to do some data transformations on this data and then present it to like our sales department or our marketing department or something like that, so that they've got the information they need to do the kind of, I don't know, special offers and stuff that they want to do. So the first thing you might want to know with this data is how much of it there is. How many users do we have? And there's a really simple command for that with DataKit, and it's called length. So I'm printing users.json here using the cat command, and I'm using this symbol here to pipe it into the length command. Pretty simple so far. There's 20 users. Now, what you have to try and imagine here is it's not just, trivial kind of, data that I've generated for this presentation. You could have hundreds or maybe thousands of, records in your data set here that you've downloaded to a JSON file from whatever database you're using, so that you can kind of play with that data and transform it and all this kind of stuff. Okay, so one really simple thing we can do here is convert it to CSV like this with the toCSV command. So now we've got a CSV file. It's not in a file, of course, but we could just redirect that to users.csv. And then if I look in that directory in Windows Explorer, I've got a CSV file here now, and I can load that in an Excel spreadsheet. And this is the kind of thing, data transformation that could be quite useful if you want to kind of hand off your data to marketing or sales or some other department. You'll see here that we've got some nested data, the address object that's under each user object, and that hasn't come through in a very nice way. And we will deal with that. We'll deal with that a little bit later. But for the moment, let's just ignore that. So this talk is called, JavaScripting from the terminal. And so it wouldn't be right if I didn't, start to include a little bit of JavaScript code from the terminal. And I don't know if you can predict what that's going to look like, but let's just go with it. So let's just have another look at users.json. I can spell it right. Let's just, as a real simple test case, let's say I want to pull out the email for each user. Yeah. So in JavaScript, you use the map function to do that. If you've got an array of data, you use the map function to map over it, pull out whatever data fields you want. We can do that using DataKit. So I've got users.json, print that out, pass it to the map command. And this is where I'm doing a bit of JavaScript coding. So I'm giving it an anonymous function here that tells it to extract the email from the record. And so what I end up with now is a JSON array of emails. So what I've done here is the map command, which roughly equates to the JavaScript map function. I've done this on purpose. I've done this so that JavaScript coders can come in here and just sort of know what to expect with some of these commands. Anything in the quotes here is the anonymous JavaScript function, and R is the record, and then that's the parameter to the function. And then the actual function itself can do whatever to transform the data or filter. I'll show you the filter command in a moment. So for example, this is a bit of a wacky use case, but say I want to kind of return an array of an email and the age of that person. So now I've got an array of arrays, and each one has email and the user's age. Pretty simple stuff so far. And of course, you could do this really quickly in JavaScript as well. But there's a whole suite of commands here that you can kind of build up piece by piece and do really complex transformations, as you're going to see in a moment. So what else can we do here? Let's have a look at filtering. So again, I'm just going to print out users.json. I'm going to pass it to the filter command. Again, this is named after the JavaScript filter function, just so you can guess what it's going to do. But we give it a function, and we can have some sort of condition in the function which says, filter out users on some sort of condition. I'm going to say, if anyone older than 29, we're going to get them back. So that gives you a cut down subset of the original JSON, but all the users are going to be 29 or more, which you can check. What we might want to do here is we might just want to check like how many users fall in this demographic. And so we can easily pipe that into the length command and see we started with 20 users and we filtered it down to 11. So you can sort of see here as well, we're starting to build up a pipeline of commands. So the original command just printed the JSON to standard output. And then we took standard input and we filtered that based on a condition. And then we passed it to another command that took in that JSON, that filtered JSON, and told us how long it is. And so we can build these up as long as we want. I could at this point I could convert that to CSV. I could tack on other transformations, do all sorts of interesting stuff with it. So that's just the simple demonstration. That's the basic demonstration, just to kind of hopefully hook you in and get you interested. I'm gonna kick off with a more complex demonstration in just a moment. First of all, I'll show you where you can get this for yourself. So if you go to my GitHub, Ashley Davis on GitHub, you can find the DataKit page, DataKit repo. So from here you can get to the API docs, which aren't what I'm talking about tonight. I'm not talking about the API. I'm talking about the CLI tonight. So you can go down to there and have a look at the CLI documentation, and you can kind of see the list of commands here that are already supported. So there's quite a few, and I've got a few more that I want to kind of get into this as well in the future. Now, let me just quickly show you how you install DataKit. So you don't have to clone the repo or anything like that, but if you do want to get the example data, clone the repo, all the data is there. But if you want to install it, it's just you have to have Node.js installed, and you do an npm install-g for global DataKit. That's it. And then you get all these commands that I'm showing you tonight. You get them installed globally onto your computer for hacking and slashing the data in whatever way you want. So, it's a toolkit for working with data. Like that's really all there is to it. You can use it for data explorations, whether you're trying to figure out what's in your database and how it all fits together. You can use it for really quick data conversions. I'll show you some of that at the end of this presentation tonight. And just any kind of quick jobs where you need to kind of transform your data or do some aggregation or something like that, and you can't be bothered writing like proper code for it. Or maybe you're just in a prototyping phase where you don't really know what you need, and so you just want to experiment and plug your data together with different commands in different ways to see what you want and figure out your data pipeline before you commit to writing the code that you might later roll out to production if that's something you need. So this is also very, very much inspired by JQ. So this is JQ is really good as well. Now the only thing that really tripped me up with JQ is that every time I went back to kind of edit the JQ code, the data transformation code, like I just couldn't remember the syntax. Like it's just a bit bizarre. It's just a bit out there. And I suppose if you were working with JQ every day, you'd get used to that and you'd be totally fine with it. But I was building these occasional data processing pipelines with JQ and thought it was lovely. But then coming back to them, it was just like unreadable code. You'd have to kind of learn it all over again to try and figure out what your code was. And also, I don't think JQ supports YAML or CSV, but I could be wrong about that as well. And so, what I wanted to do was I really wanted to have a toolkit that was based on JavaScript. So I use JavaScript or TypeScript every day, more or less. And I wanted to be able to kind of transfer that knowledge and without having to think about it, and just be able to transfer that into my kind of command line data processing activities, and just so I could feel comfortable and know what I was doing. And it makes me so much more faster and makes it so much more easier for me to get results from my data, just having that level of comfort. Okay, so I think I might move into the more complex example now. So I'm going to be using the same data set, and I'm going to be using some of the other data as well. So like I do have to warn you, this is going to get very complicated, and hopefully you won't want to run away screaming, and that you will kind of be able to keep up with it. But it will show you the power of it, and probably this example is like, I've kind of made this example up really because like I've never really done anything this complicated, but I do want to show you, how far you can go with it. So the aim of this demo is we want to look at our database. Let's say we're doing it again for like the marketing or sales department, and we want to find like our top 5 customers so that we can give them some kind of reward or something like that. So what we've got here is we've got our users.json, sales.json, products.json. Let's have a look at what's in these. So let's have a look at what's in products. So again, I've used ChatGPT to generate all this data. So it's just random data. The product data is not very interesting. It's like product A, product B, product C, all the way down to product S here. And so not particularly exciting, but it'll do for the demo. So each product has an ID that allows us to identify that product. And then if we look at the sales record, we can see that every sale references a user and a product. So essentially, we've got like 2 data sets here, users and products that we can join together through this sales table. So every sale involves a quantity of things sold and the price per unit. And again, we can just do simple stuff like, how many products do we have? We've only got 20 again. We've got 20 of everything. You just have to pretend, we've got maybe hundreds or thousands of these things that we want to analyze or look at. Every DataKit command has some really nice help included. And so I'll just zoom out a little bit. Don't worry about reading this, just sort of get the gist of the help, because every command has its own help, and it tells you your description of the command and the syntax of using it, what the inputs are, what the outputs are, and some information. And the best thing here is the examples. So the examples that kind of tell you different ways to use that command. And also at the bottom, there's a link. There's a link that shows you where to find the documentation online for that particular command. So that's really helpful if you're working with it. Now, if you're looking at data and, I've only got 20 here, so I could scroll back and we could see it all, but, let's pretend we've got 1,000 of these things, and like, it's just like a wall of data. It's just too much. So let's cut it back using the take command. We'll cut it back to 3. So you can see here, we've only got 3 items to look at. So this kind of allows you to take a little kind of peek at your data and figure out what's there and get an understanding of what you might want to do with it or how you might want to use it. Again, we can pipeline these commands, so I can put 2 CSV, and I've got like a little CSV file now of our products. DataKit has some built-in formatting commands, which are really useful as well when you don't want to kind of have to kind of output to a CSV file and load it in Excel to see it as a table. Instead, you can use the format table command, which actually prints it out as a nicely formatted table just on your terminal, so it makes it a little bit easier to read. Likewise, there's a format tree command, which actually is nice for showing you the nested structure of your data. And I'll come back to that. I'll come back to this one because I've got a more deeply nested kind of data structure that I can show you in a moment. So we can do the same sort of thing with our sales data. Just take a handful of them, format it so we can kind of see what's there. Makes it a little bit easier to read and understand what we're doing. Now what we want to do is join our data together. So we want to essentially join our sales data with our user data, so we can know how much each user has spent. And then we can sort by that spend amount or that total volume of sales, and we can find out who our best users are. So this is a little bit like doing like an SQL join. I've called it, I don't think there's any analogy in JavaScript to this, so I've just called the command intersect. And what I can do here is I can say, okay, with my users, I want to key them on their ID field, and that's from the users.json file. And then with my sales data, I want to key that on, you can see here, this user ID field. And that's from the sales JSON file. And then I give it one final anonymous JavaScript function here that tells it how to kind of merge the data together. And I'll use the simplest possible thing that I can do, which is just to take, you know, every matching user and sale, and then just return a JavaScript object with two sub objects. One is called user, one is called sale. So that gets a massive intersection of the data. I mean, it's not too big here because there's only like, you know, there's probably only 20 rows in this. But it basically says for every user, it matches them up with their sale. So by itself, this isn't that useful. But what I can do now is I can start to refine this data and merge it, basically. I'll do this. Well, first I've got to organize it by user. So this is where the group command comes in. And I can say group by, what am I grouping by here? User.id. So that's indexing under the user object here in my kind of intermediate data. I'm referencing the ID field here. And that's why I'm passing in a function here to group by that. So that gives me groups where every group has the records that are in that group. So the reason I'm doing this is because theoretically, any user can have multiple sales. And so I need to kind of manipulate the data around that. Now, in this trivial example data set, that's not the case. There's only, like, I couldn't get ChatGPT to be that sophisticated. So I could only get it to create data where there was like one user, one sale. So, but we just have to pretend that any user can have multiple sales. I'm sure you can stretch your imagination to believe that. Okay, this is getting complicated, but I'm gonna compact this data now. I'm going to use the map command. I do have my cheat sheet off screen, so I really am not doing this all off memory or, you know, without error off the bat. So I'm not perfect in that regard. Let's once I get sick of typing, I'll start cutting and pasting directly from my cheat sheet. So I'm kind of doing like a nested map here on the data. And fingers crossed that all works. Oh, it's looking pretty good. So now I can see it. I've got my user data, and for each user, I've got an array of the sales that they have been involved in. What's the next step? At this point, I might just format it so we can see what we've got. So I'll tack on a format table at the end here. So we've got all our users, and again, like, we've just not got very nice kind of formatting here for our table because there's this nested data. And in fact, this is a good time to show you format tree as well. So we've got this nested data, and I'll show you what's happening here. So on this last entry here, so record number 19 or index 19, user ID 20, Lily Turner, whoever she is, someone that's made up. Nested under here is a address object. So that's the object that's not coming up in our kind of flattened CSV kind of tabular data. And then we've also got sales, which is an array, which has one element. And you can see there the kind of the sales data sitting underneath that. So I really want to clean up the tabular data. I'm not interested in the address in this instance. So I can use the omit command to just take out the address out of every record. That's pretty convenient. I'll format it as a table. And you can see now that the address kind of column is gone. We've just got the sales column to deal with, the sales column that we want to kind of aggregate and work out how many sales that customer has had with us. Okay, this is where it gets super complicated. So I think I'm just going to cut and paste from my little cheat sheet here. And I'll give you some tips in a moment on how to actually do this, really, when you're kind of working in a real kind of data pipeline. So I'm tacking on a command here now that's doing a nested reduce. You kind of can't see it because it's sort of going off one line coming over here. So I'm doing a reduce on the sales data to aggregate it and sum it up. And we can sort of see the result of that if I just do a format table again on the end product here. So you can see that I've pulled in the quantity and the volume, sales volume. So the quantity of items sold and the amount. So that's the price multiplied by the quantity, the amount of that product that they bought with us. We've still got the sales column. So I didn't remove the sales column. I just aggregated the data and added in some new columns into my data here. So I still want to get rid of that, but then again, I can do that again using the omit command. So I'm omitting the sales column here, and we should see that that's gone. And so we've got a nicely aggregated data structure here. It's all over the place though. It's not sorted yet. So you might have noticed we've got 54 here, and then it goes up and then it goes down. So we don't quite know who our best customers are yet, but there is a command called order by that will do that. And you just tell it which column to order by, which field in the JSON array of data to order by. And it was volume, wasn't it? Yeah. So I'm going to order by volume. Format that again. Whoop, what did I do? Bit of a syntax error there. I have tried to put some nice kind of errors in here that kind of tells you like where the problem is occurring. So just my inspiration for this is Rust. I was doing a bit of Rust programming recently, and it had just really nice error messages. So I was trying to do something a little bit similar to that. But what I'm missing here is the record. There we go. Oh, so it's ran the wrong way though. We're starting off with small sales volumes and we're going up. So what I have to do just to finalize this is I have to use the basically give it a sort direction, which is to say that I want it to be descending. And now we've got it. We're almost there. We could read off this list the top 5 customers, but we can see that the volume is going down. So the higher spending customers are at the top of the list now, which is good. And the last thing I can do to get the top 5 is just to do like take 5. And then we should be left with 5 customers, the best ones, and we want to send them some sort of custom voucher code to reward them. I don't know how all that sales stuff works, but I'm sure you can imagine why that might be useful. And of course, we can just we can write that out to CSV. Well, once we write it to CSV, we also want to write it to a file. So let's call it user-sales.csv. And if I go back to Windows Explorer, I can see that, and I can open that in Excel. And not much here really, but it's something that you can hand over. This is not something you've taken from your database, done some work on, and you can kind of hand it over to someone and hopefully have it be easy for them to work with now. So I'm almost done. There's just a couple more things I want to show you. I guess I'll give you some debugging tips first, and then I'll show you a couple of data conversions. So one is to always understand your inputs, right? So that's why I'm always kind of like, look at your data, whatever it is, look at your data, understand what's there, what you're working with before you try and do anything with it. And then the first useful step is to always use length, the length command, because not only does that tell you how many you've got, but it also tells you that you're working with valid JSON data. There's not some corruption in there or some syntax error in the JSON that makes it unusable. And that's always good to know. And then, look at your, you can actually work piece by piece. Now, I know, I did this massive long thing. I did this massive long command here, and that's a bit hard to follow and a bit hard to put together. But it doesn't have to be like that. You can do it piece by piece, right? So if you want to just do this one thing, just take this one command, just run that one command by itself, and you can actually save like intermediate results. So I'm saving this to temp1.json. We can have a look at that. So I've got like a temporary output here. And so instead of doing, let me recall that big command. Where is it? Yeah. So instead of doing this massive command at once, you can kind of break it down into parts. So I'll do my grouping next. So I'll take that temp JSON, so the temporary intermediate file that I've checked, made sure was okay. I've checked that everything kind of worked out okay in there, and I can pipe that into the rest of the command, and then I can save that as temp2.json or whatever you want. So I'm working through it piece by piece, and I'm checking my outputs and I'm checking my inputs each time. So it makes it a lot easier to work through the whole process without errors, and also just not getting overwhelmed by this like massive command line. What else do we want to look at? Oh, another thing that might be useful as well is that, instead of just typing it in at the command line, write it up in a text editor first. You can write each, separate it out over multiple lines. This works really well. This works much better actually on Linux and Mac. Like here's what my cheat sheet looks like. So I've got like this massive command here, chopped up over multiple lines. I'm not sure that this works on Windows, but I know this works on Linux and probably on Mac OS as well. You can just type this multi-line command in, and you can kind of see that each command here is on its own separate line. So it's much easier to understand what it's doing, much easier to put together. All right. Now, I've got some cool data to show you as well. Some of my favorite data is this Star Wars data. I can't even remember where I got this from. I used this in a demo for BrisJS, I think a couple of years ago. I got it from somewhere online, and I've just been sort of carrying it around with me in my back pocket because I love it. You've got, all the Star Wars characters, maybe not all of them, but, a lot of them anyway, planets, it's just fun data to work with and to play with. I'm just going to show you a couple of simple data conversions just to show you how easy it can be. So let's say we want to go from JSON to CSV. I mean, you've already seen that in action anyway, so it's not that exciting, but it's just using the toCSV command. And then obviously you can kind of, save that as a CSV file and you've converted it. If you want to go from CSV file back to JSON, then you will use the from CSV command, and that brings it back to JSON. So you could save that as a JSON file. You can also go to YAML, we support YAML. So we're going from JSON to YAML here. And we could save that as a YAML file. And then we could bring the YAML file back using from YAML. So bringing it back into JSON. And so then we can pipeline it into all these other commands that DataKit supports. Anything else? Yes, here's a cool one. So one thing that's really cool is you can use this directly with your REST APIs as well. So I'm just using as an example the JSON placeholder to do's REST API, and I'm going to pull it down here using curl. And S means silent, I think, so that it doesn't kind of like you just want to get back the JSON. If you get back any other progress indicators or any other output, it kind of messes up DataKit. So you just need the JSON. And when I run this curl command, it's pulling down this list of to-dos from this REST API. Hopefully. Yep. There we go. So we've got a bunch of to-dos here, and you can just pipe it directly into DataKit. So I'm going to, how many is there? There's 200. I'm going to pull out, I can do a map, and I can pull out the user ID. So let's do that. So map, out of my record, I'm going to pull the user ID. I can spell it. So I've got a list of user IDs. You can see some users have got a bunch of to-dos against their name. There's a distinct command that just gets you distinct. So this is the users that are using the system at the moment. Assuming it was a real system, which it's not. It's just obviously it's just placeholder fake data. And if you had a lot of them, you could pipe that into the length command, and you could see how many distinct users you've got. Adding to-dos to the list or something like that. What else have we got here? I'll show you one more thing, and that is sort of almost like to go hand in hand with DataKit, I made MongoKit. So MongoKit is a command line application where you kind of set your connection string to your database. You can set it from the command line, or you can set it in an environment variable, and then you can use commands to pull down all your data really easily. So for example, MongoKit, zoom in a bit, hopefully everyone can see this. MongoKit get a collection, and then you tell it the collection name, and the database you're connected to, it'll pull down that named collection as JSON, which you can store as a JSON file locally, and then you use DataKit to process that. Or you can just tack DataKit commands on the end of this, pipe the results of this into DataKit commands directly, and to work directly with the data that's coming out of your database. So you can find the DataKit code repo on my GitHub page. That's Ashley Davis on GitHub. The repo is DataKit. You can install it through npm, and it's a simple, cool toolkit for reading and writing data and doing transformations and aggregations and all sorts of cool stuff like that. I just want to quickly plug my book before I end, and we have some questions. So where is it? I'm working on a book called Rapid Full Stack Development. It's about being a more effective and efficient developer across the stack. I'm over halfway through writing it now. It's been taking a while because I'm also it's a whole other story, but I'm writing another book as well. But this one is like over halfway through now, hoping to finish it maybe mid next year at this rate. But you can get on board early for a discount and get chapters as I've written them, and you can give feedback as the book is being written. So really looking for support for this book. So if you like the idea of that, please jump on and get it for a discount. And I think I'm done.
Amazing, sir. Thank you very much for taking us through all that.
I'm a little bit ahead of schedule, but it depends on the questions, I guess.
No, you're all good. You're all good. We've got a whole bunch of different questions we can run through as well, and just I guess some support and some love from the audience as well. So yeah, we're absolutely keen. And look, I love it. I often run into this like, oh, I've got a file. The hell do I do now? So, this is just so much easier. So absolutely going to install this today. So that's going to help me out a lot as well. So yeah, it seems so obvious. I think like I saw one of the comments on this as well. It seems so obvious, but it wasn't there, and you did it. And like I honestly, it feels like it should have always existed.
I feel like I could have been using this for years, and it would have been really useful. But every time, like I said, every time I need to do it, I just write custom code without thinking about it. And then somehow this time around, I had the epiphany that like, oh, I need to use JQ, but JQ isn't exactly what I need. Oh, yep. Why don't we just use JavaScript? Yeah.
Well, I'm always throwing this data into an object map in the REPL or something like that, and then just trying to play with it that way. But this is just nice and native. Sometimes it's just going to be a lot quicker to just do that one thing. So,
before someone asks the question as well, you can actually load your code from a file as well. You don't actually have to type your code in the command line. It will actually load a file and use eval to run that. So I think that can make it a little bit easier to work with. But I don't suggest that anyone uses this for production coding or anything like that. It's for quick and dirty stuff, exploratory stuff, and prototyping. It's not, you shouldn't be writing any real kind of products this way. It's just what you need to do to get the job done sometimes, right?
Just you wait, someone's going to write an entire server-side app with this thing. So and you're going to be like, no, look, that is technology. It is there to be used in the most creative of ways as well. So no, that's wonderful, mate. I'll start throwing through a couple of the questions already. No particular order, or maybe it is a particular order. It's probably based upon the way they came in, the time order. So I think right off the top, we had Jordan coming in saying, nice. Have you ever been able to use the rootkit on a live database like MongoDB to do any CRUD operations? So you're essentially saying straight into live DBs or live Mongo databases.
It can be very error prone to do that kind of thing. Obviously, you want to be very careful with that. But MongoKit has like getter and setter operations. So you can actually set documents, update fields in documents. You can do all the CRUD stuff basically using MongoKit. And I wouldn't want to see anyone kind of using that on a live production database, because obviously it's really easy to make a mistake.
Yep.
But it was really useful for me when I was kind of like creating replicas of my company's database for testing and stuff like that. So if you've got a test database or a local database that you want to populate really quickly, MongoKit can do it really easily. And of course, you can update your production databases with it, but I'm sure anyone that uses Mongo, I love MongoDB, but I'm sure anyone who uses it knows that it's really easy to shoot yourself in the foot because you could just easily delete something that you didn't want to delete. So there's that downside. Be very careful.
Absolutely. Don't let anyone run get near a non-read-only live production database. So yeah, no, that's definitely a disclaimer and a half. We don't want anyone to go and be live editing these things. But hey, local hacking on your own data sets and working on that stuff, and just using the DB as like a better scratch space, honestly, sounds like a really fantastic feature of this. So yeah, no, I can definitely see the usefulness of that. Some more love, I think, just in the next few comments here. Nice, seems like a JQ plus JSON path combination with more. So there's a lot of additional love in here as well. There's one question here. Other than interactive querying, have you utilized this well to parse and capture different stages of a data query to local files each step? So I replied to that one interactively while it was sort of, because you did actually go and show this. You sort of said you did step through this. You kind of went and piped it, then each one to a new file, so you can build up this query, which I think is part of what Anonymous here is kind of trying to ask. But I guess
you definitely need to do that while you're trying to figure out what you're trying to do. Like another way I use this, which was really useful in my contracting work, I got asked to do kind of like a stock take of what we had in the cloud, and so I was able to kind of get some CLI commands for the cloud provider to spit me out, like, to do a search of all the resources, like all the VMs and all the databases and storage volumes and all stuff like that, and there was like hundreds of thousands of them, because a lot of them are just defaults, right? Like they come with the cloud vendor, and then you spit all that out to JSON files. And then I was using DataKit to work through it, filter out all the kind of default rubbish that I didn't care about. And I was actually trying to find the resources that the company did care about, and create like some spreadsheets for these people that kind of showed how, like, what they had in there. But you can also, this kind of stuff is also really useful for cloud billing. If you ever kind of get a bill and you want to work that out, and you've got a massive like CSV file that you've downloaded from your cloud vendor, and you want to kind of filter that by the most expensive stuff, or sort it by the most expensive stuff to find out really where you're spending the money, it can be really useful for doing that kind of stuff as well. So just anything really that involves data. But there are a couple of the things that I've used for recently. Yeah,
great. Yeah, I think part of my question here was I guess in response to this question then was I'm assuming maybe you mean like through library flags as well. So like, is there an option in the I guess the binaries that you're piping to just pick up like a dash with output, so that it always outputs like every single time without having to pipe? Or is that paradigm shift that not sort of part of the intent of the library?
I'm not really understanding what you're meaning. Can you explain?
Yeah, so I was asking a question through this question. So like essentially, is there any option on any of the utilities that will force them to always write to disk, I think, through each of their options?
Yeah. So well, let me give you an example. Share screen again.
Because I think that addresses the point of the question there as well, which was, is there a way to get it to always write for each stage of this query? So I think rather than
it won't do it automatically. It won't do it automatically. Okay. But so the default is that it'll read JSON from standard input, and then whatever the command does, it'll write the output as JSON to standard output. But you can completely control that. So we've been using, so just as an example, we've been using the length command like this. We've been piping to it. Okay, I'm sorry, I've got to convert that from CSV before I do that, because it only handles. This is why we have to convert, because it only handles JSON. So we've been using the length command that way, but we can also tell it where to read the data, right? So if you give it a parameter, that parameter is going to be the file to load it from, and then the length command isn't a great one for this one. What's a good example for this? Have a look at the JSON file. Let's do a filter based on height, and we'll save that to a file. So there's two ways to do that. I could do it just by printing the whole thing to standard input, and then doing a filter on that and saying height, let's say, I don't know, it's greater than 120. So by default that comes to standard output. But we can also say you always put the input file first, but if you want to read from standard input, use a dash. So that just preserves the behavior. We can also say output.json, whatever you want that to be, and then that will be the filtered output. So every command can read and write from files, and if you wanted to, you could just get rid of this piping altogether, and instead of this hyphen here, lost it, sorry. So again, instead of this hyphen over here, I can give it the characters.json, and that does the same thing, except it's reading from the first file and it's writing to the second file. And this just natively understands, based on the extension, what you want to do as well. So that'll just write out the CSV file just by changing the extension. Same for a YAML file as well. So we've got a YAML output file here now as well. So it supports the different file formats really seamlessly.
Very nice.
But there's no automatic kind of writing of queries or anything like that. It's just not something I even considered myself.
Yep. No, I think that's about as automatic as it would need to be. That makes a lot of sense. Otherwise, I think with a poorly conceived query, you'd probably end up writing enough data to disk that you probably fill up a hard drive. But I think one of the other questions here was around if you have a well-defined set of related models in a database, would you be able to use these tools to create local JSON versions of the data set with the relations intact? I presume so.
Well, these two, DataKit by itself only works with JSON. And then it's got a couple of commands for dealing with CSV and YAML files, and when you're importing or outputting a file, it can automatically figure out from the extension what kind of data you're importing. But under the hood, it's really all just JSON files, and it actually makes it really easy to extend. So it's really easy to add a new command because it's like a framework, and you just plug a bit of logic in the middle that kind of deals with JSON data, and your little bit of logic for your command doesn't really care about what data format it is. It just kind of deals with parsed JSON data. Yeah. And then so that's what it gets as input and what it gets as output. And it doesn't care whether it comes from standard input or where it goes to. It just knows that it's coming from somewhere and going to somewhere. So I refactored it early on to be this really kind of easy to extend framework that made it really easy to keep adding new commands to it. But in terms of like integration with databases and understanding the interactions between, or the relationships between tables in databases, like it doesn't know anything like that. Like it doesn't talk to a database. It can't infer any relationships by itself. You can use that intersect command to tell it, what fields to find the relationships. So you can do something that's a bit like an SQL join. You have to provide a lot of that logic yourself in what happens after the join, which I don't think you have to do with SQL. So it's only very, very loosely like an SQL join, and it doesn't talk to any databases natively. But that other thing that I created was MongoKit. So that was just a separate thing that you can install that allows you to pull JSON data from MongoDB. You could do the same kind of thing with SQL. In fact, I'd love it if someone went out and made SQL kit that could, pull data in like down to your computer as JSON files from SQL. And then we could use those SQL files with DataKit. So it'll all work nicely together. But DataKit by itself, it doesn't know or care about databases.
Yeah, I think the implied solution to the question here is about, parsing a particular schema that's defined in JSON and then having it intersect automatically on those different related keys. But that's kind of like, that's something for them to implement.
Yeah. It could be doable. I never really got much of a chance to use JSON schema. I've read about it and used it just a handful of times. It's really cool, but it's JSON itself. So you could run the schema through DataKit itself and do something like that. But in terms of understanding how data fits together, I don't really think that's the purpose of DataKit. It's pretty low level. It doesn't really make any assumptions about how your data works or what it does. It was difficult. It was actually difficult to keep it that sort of general because, of course, I've got all these specific ways I want to use it. And the fact that I made it extensible by typing JavaScript at the command line means you can literally do anything with it. You can apply any kind of your own logic or filters or connections or conditions or whatever in there and just customize it however you want on the command line when you're trying to figure out what you're trying to do.
Exactly. Yeah, that's good. I guess the next question, or what's the order here? There we go. Next one here is I see formatters. I guess the display formatting. Could we contribute formatter plugins? There's some folks who want to be able to create other outputs, I guess, table and tree.
I jump into the repo and open an issue saying what you want to do. There's no, it doesn't really support plugins, so I don't know how we do that. It's pretty easy to add a command, and if your command kind of fits the core kind of thing, then I'd be happy to accept a pull request, and I'd love to get other people making commands, but once they start getting specific to people's requirements, I'm probably not going to accept them. If we could kind of discuss it in GitHub Issues, maybe we can figure out a way between us to make this pluggable so people can add stuff to it.
Absolutely, sounds good. There's another one here by Luke Warren. Great tool, Ash. Thinking a probe function might be helpful functional programming style lenses could also be very interesting and useful. Open to contributors, question mark.
Yeah,
so
no,
yes,
I have considered that, and I've actually asked for Luke's opinion before on how you use lenses and to pull apart trees and tree data structures and put them back together. And I do have like this section in my to-do list for DataKit that's like, how do I do that? How do I do that in DataKit from the command line? So Luke, I'll probably be picking your brains again at some point in the future on how to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah, nice. Well, you said open to contributors, question mark. So that's a yes. Get in there, Luke. Sounds good. I think we've got the next question here, which is in flattened tabular data, when we have serialized objects that can't be presented. Okay, so in your example where you've got like object, could we specify a sub-processing function like to get it to stringify?
Yeah. I'm not sure. I did have a think about how that would work. But I do so I have, some of you may know that I have a data processing library in JavaScript and TypeScript called DataForge. And it allows you to kind of like format a big data set and plug in formatters for, particular fields. Like, this is a function that formats it, or this is like a string that kind of sets the time or the date format, stuff like that. Yeah, that's definitely on the cards for DataKit. I haven't thought at all about how that would work from the command line, how that would fit. But if someone out there is interested to have a play with that and have a go at it, I'd love to see what they come up with.
Yeah, it sounds like the solution there is still to just, do an intermediary step of flattening those things into a single piece. And
right. You can just map it, right, and just pull out the field you want and transform it. So like I went through this process as well. There were all these specific things that I wanted to do with DataKit, and I was like, oh no, you can do that with map. Oh, you can do that with map. There's also a bigger command called transform. So when your data is an array, so map only works if the data is actually array. So does filter and reduce. There's a reduce command in there as well. So, and length as well. So there's a bunch of commands that only actually work if the input is actually an array. But your input might be like an object, or even just some primitive value. And there is a generic transform command, which can transform the data no matter what it is, whether it's an array or not. So that's kind of like the I guess the worst case scenario. Like I tend to use it just with arrays of data, but if you've got something else, you can use this transform command on it, and input is the entire data set, and output is whatever you want. So it's at that level, it's not just working with arrays of data or like typical database data. It could be something else.
Yeah, and I think that fits the bill nicely. Last but not least, this question says, how does this work? Which of these are binaries, and what is passing indexes and data to the parameters?
Do I have time to show how one of the commands works?
Yeah, you could quickly show us some of the ins and outs.
There's a lot under the hood, but like I said, I made this framework that allows the command to only care about incoming data and outgoing data. So let me just share screen again, and I'll just and I invite people to kind of jump in the code and have a look, because like it's surprisingly simple. There's a lot of stuff under the hood that says, like, am I getting it from standard input, or am I getting it to a file? What format is the file? Shall I convert it? There's a lot of complicated stuff under the hood. Let me just find my page here. So this is on GitHub. We'll just drill down and we'll have a look. So these are all just JavaScript, right? There's no compiled binaries here at all. It's all just JavaScript installed through NPM and running on Node.js. And or if you're interested in how to make something be installed to look like it's a command or a binary on the system, have a look in the package.json. So here basically is this bin subsection of the package.json. This tells you all the commands and what script file they relate to. So whenever you run the format table command, it's going to run this script command here. And if we look at that, if you drill down under the CLI folder here and we find that, actually I'll do map, because map's a nice one that everyone knows, hopefully, the map function. So look at map. And this is just a JavaScript file with no extension. And there's like, I don't know, do you call that like a hashbang or something? It tells it to run it under Node. So that's how it knows to run it under Node. And then it basically just imports the command and the documentation for it. And I made a helper function. So this is kind of like part of the command line framework, as it were, that there's a run function. that basically it passes the command to and the documentation for it, and it sort of takes care of running it, providing it with data, doing something with the output, and then printing out the documentation when you type in like help on the command line. The real guts of it are down in the map.js file. This is all written in TypeScript as well, but because this is what is run on when it's installed on your computer, it's already been, at this point, it's already been compiled to JavaScript. But I'll show you what it looks like before it's compiled to JavaScript in TypeScript. And that's all the commands are under the source directory here. We look under CLI, we should see map. Oh no, sorry. I just went back to where I was. Here I am. So this is it in its entirety. You know, most of the time I spent working on this was the documentation. This part here is the documentation for this command. And it's like a JavaScript object that gets like formatted. And I'm actually quite proud of how I generate the documentation for this. So this thing gets printed out on the terminal when you type help. And also I have like a pre-publication script that runs that converts this to Markdown that gets stored in the repo so that you can browse the help file there as well. But that's all. This is the guts of it, right? Not much to it really. What it's doing here is it's accepting a bunch of arguments, an array of strings. So that's what you typed in at the command line. Because we're loading in a user-defined anonymous function for the map function, it kind of does that first using a help method load user function. So that basically takes the argument, or it loads a file if you've specified to bring in your code from a file, and it evals it. Well, it doesn't eval it till down here, actually. So it just kind of loads it in this step. So you've got a function that you can call. Actually, you have to just have a look in there. I can't even remember how it works. It's been a few months since I actually was in the guts of it. The next thing it does here anyway is it calls input data. So input data will, by default, load it in from standard input, or if you've specified a file name in the arguments, it'll you know, if it's a JSON file, it'll load it in and parse it from JSON. If it's CSV or YAML, it'll load it in and parse it from that format. There's a little bit of error checking here, and then it just runs the JavaScript map function. So this is like the guts of that map function. And for every record in the data, it's calling this helper function invoke user function. So that's what's, I think, kind of like doing the eval under the hood, and basically doing a little bit of nice kind of error handling and showing you if there's an error in your code, you know, where the error was. And then at the end of it, it's calling this output data helper function. And so, you know, depending on what you put in your arguments, it's going to either output it directly to the terminal standard output, or it's going to write it to a file if you've specified a file in, you know, whatever format that's going to be in. And we're just passing in the transform data to write out. So each command is like really simple to understand, but, you know, under the hood, under some of these functions, it gets a little bit complicated. Besides that, though, you know, like through various iterations, I simplified it and just to kind of optimize for adding new commands.
That sounds awesome. Yeah, look, it's very straightforward. So I think, yeah, folks should definitely look into, you know, under the hood of all this magic and just see where you know, where it works for your operations.
So anyone that's interested in contributing, find the repo, and the first step is to run the tests. There's a whole suite of automated tests around this that make sure it works. They take a while to run, some of them, but it's worthwhile just to see what happens.
Very nice. Well, good, my friend. No, I think that was very thorough. And of course, everyone, if you do have additional questions, we're still here for a little while. Feel free to leave them in there. I don't mind pulling back our speakers to answer more questions if they're around, they haven't disconnected. Yeah, no, absolutely. That would be fantastic. I really appreciate you taking the time out, showing everyone a cool tool and a little bit about how it came to be as well. So thank you again.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Thanks very much, my friend. And yeah, everyone, please give him a good virtual round of applause as we head into our next speaker's talk. So next up, we have Adam, who's going to be taking you through a bit about how we can get extensible with our JavaScript and with our web apps in particular. So Adam, are you there?
Yes, I am. Let me share my screen.
Yeah, please do. Take it away, my friend.
Here you go. So you should be looking at my slide.
Sure am.
Awesome. So yeah, I'm going to be talking about add-ons, plugins, and similar. So it's quite a fitting talk following Ashley's talk. given Ashley has already received 2 requests for how people can implement extensions to DataKit. So that's exactly what I'm talking about, is how to actually build a framework in such a way that it is user extensible. And by user, I mean developer. Some of your users that are developers want to extend your application, which clearly is a popular thing. You've come in the right place, and it is quite a dry topic. So I'll also use this as an excuse to cover some interesting JavaScript things, just to keep you interested. But yeah, so the what and why, I won't spend too much time here. So the what is basically anything similar to what you've seen in browser extensions, VS Code extensions. Some of these manifest themselves as apps. So Slack and Google have app marketplaces, and really even apps on your phone can be considered an extension of this. Really anything that allows someone to extend an existing piece of software is what I mean. And yeah, benefits besides building a community and really allowing features to be built that you possibly don't have time for, but a very specific niche of people require. That's really, I think, is the main thing. But really, the main benefit is when you need it, you know, right? When you need a plugin system, you're gonna know, and you're gonna start running into things that make you think, oh, I'm gonna need a plugin system for this product. And yeah, so there's 3 main things that you need for any plugin system. And I'm going to go a little bit more specifically around JavaScript, but a lot of this applies to really building a plugin system for any type of application, regardless of tech stack. But basically, you need the high-level API, which allows your developers to interact with your application. So this is completely separate to the APIs that you use, and should be an API that you implement, document, and publish to your users. So the keywords here, the keyword here is hooks. So you need to allow your users to be able to hook into your application. So a lot of these extensibility APIs have hooks that allow you to detect when the application started, when the application stopped, when certain things happen, basically sort of like event handlers, and basically allow your plugin to respond to that, in addition to having that API that allows you to basically draw things on the screen or handle user input, etc. And it really depends on your application. But yeah, I'll dive into that deeper later. But yeah, the other thing that you need is a sandbox. So because we are dealing with code that basically anyone can write and is intended to be executed on your user's machine, well, at least in most cases, you need to find a way to make sure that you can limit any malicious effects this code might have. So you don't want a plugin to secretly steal your users' tokens and run. So you need some level of sandboxing. So you need a way to make sure that you have that level of control over packages. And even if you don't have sandboxing, you need to have some type of capability-based permission systems. So, you know, from the most basic example is apps on your phone, where basically you need to give the app certain permissions. That's the type of thing that I'm talking about. Although with plugins, these permissions are usually hidden all the way in some manifest, and most people don't really look at that manifest. So yeah, it's quite unpopular, unfortunately. And the last thing that you need is some way to distribute and allow these extensions to be packaged and shared, and you know, sort of like app marketplaces. But really, with any extension ecosystem, you'll see the types that have a marketplace, like the VS Code extensions hub, or you'll see some that have kind of a Wild West situation where people just share extensions on unofficial forums and such. But yeah, that'll be completely up to you. And there's actually a lot more that you need, but these are just the minimum 3, and I'll talk more about what else you might need later. So some really basic ways to implement plugins for a web application, and really the first one applies to all applications, is to basically allow someone to write some code and have some way to inject that code into your tool and execute that code. In JavaScript, that can be really simple because you can just fetch the code from some web resource and just put it into an eval function and run the code. And really, you can actually do anything with this. That's really the absolute minimum that you can do. Obviously not a very good idea. Again, there's zero sandboxing, and although you do get package management for free, so to speak, because any URL with some JavaScript on it can become your code. So that's really as simple as you can get. And a version of this works in any other programming language, especially languages that are interpreted, because you can just interpret more of the language. So sort of like that eval function in JavaScript. In languages that aren't, you actually usually use an interpreter. So even in, say, you're coding in C or Rust or whatever, there's a lot of solutions that allow you to run something like JavaScript or WebAssembly on top. And usually these are the basis of a plugin system. But yeah, we are fortunately on the web, so there's a few more options available that bring about some level of sandboxing and package management, as well as a high-level API already made for you, so you don't have to spend too much time. So, for example, iframes. You could do a lot with iframes. You could basically fetch code. Instead of executing it in the main page, you can inject it into an iframe element, and it will execute under a sandbox, because iframes are actually sandboxed, and you can specify all of the permissions that usually the user would have to deal with in the UI, such as camera access, microphone access, and geolocation access. All of these are permissions that you'd get prompted for. You can actually specify as attributes to the iframe element. And in this way, you have a programmatic sandbox that allows you to run any untrusted code in a secure way. So you get that sandbox for free, basically. The disadvantage there is performance. So if you do use iframes, unfortunately, although they look like they might be running in a separate thread, because it's a separate page, if you do use this technique, it's going to be running under the same location, and so it's actually running on the same thread, and so someone could simply put an infinite loop in there, and your whole page will crash every time. So yeah, it's not a perfect sandbox, and none of these are perfect sandboxes. And yeah, it's very difficult to achieve that, but it's really not that important, because what I'll reveal later is that almost no one actually sandboxes, and it's unfortunately the responsibility becomes on the user to just suss out plugins that are not malicious. But yeah, the other thing, and I'll move on to the next slide here where I discuss the other ones. So the other ones are web workers. You could use web workers by basically injecting code into the web worker, and with web workers, it's the same as eval. You can put any string in there, and you can spin it up into a web worker, and it'll run under a completely separate thread. It has some level of isolation, so it can't actually access things like local storage without your permission. So you'd have to implement some type of messaging to get access to critical data like that. But it's not a perfect sandbox. So web workers do have access to things like if you have an IndexedDB database, they have access to that without any control that you can exert. So it's not a perfect sandbox also. So you're still going to have to scan the code and do some manual review if you're going to go down that route. Other options include web components, or something that I've recently used at work is Webpack remote modules, which are really more ways of injecting code into your application. there's really technologies built upon that same idea of injecting code. They don't add any extra sandboxing ability, but yeah, they work in situations where you don't really need the sandboxing, for example, in internal applications, etc. And just a little bit more around where this whole thing about sandboxing comes from. And the reality is technologies like Flash and Silverlight, and even included Netspace plugins here, but a lot of these technologies started off not as plugin systems, but as a way to implement some type of interactive experience. And somewhere between their heyday and their demise, they were being used as a plugin system by some applications because they were nice and sandboxed. And so what that really means is any technology where you have some kind of scripting engine running can actually be used as a plugin system. So you can use a Lua interpreter, a Python interpreter. A lot of these languages actually have JavaScript-based interpreters that allow you to run their code in JavaScript in a sandboxed way. And you can pass them data and get data out of them. So this is really a little bit of an extreme way to do it, but it's, in my opinion, the most sandboxed and one of the more secure ways of doing it, because you have full control over the commands that can actually run. And so, yeah, that's one way to consider. And something that I've done in the past is you can even go so far as to make your own small domain-specific language with a parser generator. So an excellent one is peg.js, which is just good to know that it exists. Do check it out. Basically, is an extremely simple way that allows you to write basically a small programming language that allows people to implement any kind of functionality, but you would have full control over the grammar that they use and over what commands can actually execute, what data can be read, and yeah, it's just a way that allows you to have very high level of control over these plugins that run. Another thing is CSP. So CSP is content security policy, which again, another thing that's good to know about, at least, which basically allows you to control what runs on your web page. And this is like a last ditch effort. So you can use a content security policy to basically deny all external scripts from running. You can deny scripts from a specific origin to run. You can deny image tags, for example. You can do a lot of these small rules that apply either to your whole web page or to just an iframe if you like. But you can use it to do some really nifty stuff like air gapping an entire iframe. So that would prevent the iframe from making any web requests. And so basically the iframe would have to send a message to the main page asking for the web request to proceed. And then you can scan the message and make sure it isn't trying to upload user data, for example. So you can combine a lot of these techniques to do some extremely complex things and build a lot of homebrew sandboxing functionality that I've seen some other applications use. And yeah, that's it. But I'm going to leave you with the good news, depending on who you ask, which is the fact that a lot of the plugin systems that I've mentioned, and including some of the ones on the main slide, on the first slide, don't really sandbox. And so I think as a developer, unfortunately or fortunately, if you're implementing a user-facing plugin system, it's quite unlikely that you'll be asked to sandbox. So I did spend a lot of time on sandboxing here because I think it's really important, even though it seems to be overlooked in a lot of different plugin systems for really famous products that everyone uses. And it's very common to get security breaches coming through these plugin systems. And so, yeah, it's something to keep in mind. And so as a user also, you have to be able to be very careful about the plugins that you run locally, because you're not just running most of the time, you're not just running an extension to an application, you're running a whole separate application, essentially, because the plugin usually can do anything. And this is really also relates to a lot of the new restrictions that tools like VS Code has been putting in around. So you might notice that it asks you if you trust a directory or things like that, where basically they started with a kind of a weak sandbox and they're trying to enhance it. So yeah, it's there, but I recommend if you're doing something user facing to think about it. But yeah, the bad news is there's actually a lot more that you need to build. The obvious ones are you're going to have to publish a sample add-on so people can, and this is really the way that I find myself as someone who's developed plugins, is always go to the sample add-on, copy it, and change your code. So I've dealt with products that don't have that, and I think it's just a bare minimum. The other thing is to basically have some way to manage versions of different plugins. So you always start with a single high level API, but from my experience, the API changes, and then you're left with multiple different kinds of plugins depending on the application version. And so it's really good to have that built in from the start, where you have like a versioning system for your plugins and have your application be aware of different versions, and maybe even surface that all the way up to the user level, where the users know what plugins are compatible with what versions. And I think something interesting to check out is how the VS Code team has handled that, because they've certainly had to deal with that. But yeah, another thing is add-on verification, where basically you'd have to find a way to, so some people sign add-ons, like cryptographically sign them to say that this add-on has been reviewed by the main developer, and so users can trust it. And if you're developing a web application, you can verify the signature once the once, because you can download the public key through the web app, and so you can just verify it inside the application, and now only add-ons that you have verified can actually run. Another thing is cross add-on interaction. So this is something that sandboxing really helps with, because in a lot of products, for example, Obsidian comes to mind, where you can have a lot of different add-ons and they all talk to each other, and they have an extremely powerful interface. They can do anything, and so it becomes extremely common where you have two different add-ons interacting in a way that neither developer intended, and they basically break the whole application. So this is another thing and another reason why sandboxing is extremely important. But yeah, that's all. And I will also say that there are such things as plugin engines. It's a category of software. Feel free to Google them. They're not very popular. I think I found some for JavaScript, but not very popular. So I wouldn't use them, but it's good to know that they exist. And yeah, that's all from me, Kevin. Let me know if you have any questions.
Oh, fantastic, mate. Yeah, look, we've had a few things fly in, but no, look, this is a really good primer on a lot of extremely different topics that, you know, people can start to dig into, because honestly, that, you know, you've opened up a world of examples to everyone from all different kinds of approaches. And I think, you know, depending on what people's needs are really going to lead them down these different kind of roads as well. So I think it's been very useful for, you know, you to highlight all the different kind of avenues that might come up in this kind of investigation. How did, I guess before we get into the question, so how did you sort of go about looking at what level of separation that you felt you needed, depending on the kinds of apps that we're building internally as well?
Well, I think I was drawing on two experiences making this talk. The first is apps that we're building internally, and so that one, I don't think you need a lot of separation, because you can have some level of trust in the code that's being run, and actually less separation is better, because with a lot of separation, you're going to need an extremely comprehensive API that's hand-rolled usually. The other
inter-company examples, of course, will give you a degree of flexibility on kind of just on spec. But yeah, please go on.
Exactly. Yeah, and yeah, it's really case by case. But the other The other experience I've had is implementing a plugin system for a small product that I was working on, where people were able to create small interactive experiences and embed them into the application. And in that type of thing, sandboxing became extremely important, and that's why there's a lot of emphasis on it. But because it's a web application, you really don't want any external code reading anything, reading your cookies, your local storage, any of that, because it's worse than an XSS attack, basically. So yeah, you're just asking for it if you don't sandbox appropriately. And it's very interesting with web applications because you have little control over the overall environment, and then you're introducing all of this external code. So yeah, it's good that we have technologies to sandbox, and it's unfortunate that people don't think of them as that, especially with iframes. I've seldom seen them mentioned as a sandboxing tool, even though they certainly are. But yeah, it's I think what I've tried to do with this talk is just list a lot of different technologies, and it's good to put in the back of your head, and you'll know when you need it, and you'll go, oh, I know about this thing. It's perfect for this. So yeah, hope that was helpful in that way.
I think so. And then that, if not, they can always request a detailed follow-up talk on BrisJS, right?
Happy to oblige.
That's it. We'll get stuck into a couple of questions here, I think. One of the ones that came in later as well is around having your own sort of DSL. So I think the question here really is about, when would you suggest having your own DSL? Like, what are the different scenarios that really like thrives under, like when do you really know that this is going to pay off rather than just be a rather big overhead?
Yeah. So it's 99% of the time it's going to be a big overhead, but you'll know when you need it. So the situation where I've had to build a DSL was an application where users were contributing interactive stories of sorts into the application, and so they had to write that in a custom DSL. You could, of course, allow them to just write it in JavaScript, but that would require layers upon layers of frameworks, and basically you're leaving the choice of framework up to the user. And so by using a DSL, you're making that decision for them, and you're giving them like 5 different functions that they can use. But unlike with a full language, you actually have control over, so it's not Turing complete. It doesn't have to, at least it doesn't have to be Turing complete. So you can do things like prevent infinite loops that can become impossible. And so if you're doing a platform that's YouTube-like, where anyone can see content submitted by anyone, you don't want someone to be able to crash someone else's browser. And at this point, even if you use like a Python interpreter, which is like already a huge overhead, you're not going to be able to achieve that, because anyone, you just can't reliably enforce these limits within a browser. So that's where a language becomes, and you don't have to think of it as a DSL, which sounds like a lot of overhead. You can think of it as a list of commands with arguments. The DSL is just a nice user experience that you're adding on top. So yeah, it depends.
Yeah, and I guess one of the most common ones there that the list comes to my mind is going to be something just like Markdown syntax. That's an obvious way that has been able to provide people the ability to give rich formatted content in a fairly, at least from a developer's perspective, fairly common syntax that we're all kind of working with in different tools like our source code tools and things like that as well. And it's become extremely ubiquitous, and it also kind of offers a level of safety and syntax parsing, and not being able to inject a bunch of things in there that are obviously not part of the intended Markdown as well. So yeah, there's a lot of I think benefits around the content presentation there as well. So there's a lot of things that will come in that realm. But yeah, hopefully that answer's helpful for folks here on the call. But yeah, there's another one that I think is also a bit trickier to answer, because definitely, given the power that it has, where do you see WASM taking over in this extensive? Wait, I've butchered that question. how do you see WASM taking over the extensibility in this space? Is it just for high-end processing needs or abilities? So, the WebAssembly crew has been doing all sorts of incredible things with, even like 3D engine enhancements and stuff to the browser. Processing crypto or, all sorts of different things that can happen. But yeah, in terms of the plugin ability, I guess, where do you see that fitting in this kind of argument of what you should reach for in your plugin toolkit?
I personally haven't used WASM too much, and to my best knowledge, I don't think, I could be wrong, but I don't think it provides a lot of sandboxing guarantees. And so as far as extensibility goes, it's just a way to share code and compiled from a different language. But it could be said that where I do see it useful is non-web applications. So if I'm writing a desktop application and I need a way to add extensibility, I can support WASM and have like a small browser window, and now people can write plugins in any language. So it's nice universality in that way, but I don't see it being very useful in a web application sense. Maybe because I haven't used it enough.
Yeah, I'd say it's probably one of those offside processing tools. Hey, Ash.
Can I chime in on this one?
You can, of course. This is an open forum.
Sorry to butt in, Adam. I was just going to say that to my knowledge, WebAssembly is sandboxed, and that you can't actually do anything useful to it unless the thing that's running it gives it the hooks to do what it needs to do. So I'm not sure how far that security extends, but I do believe it's sandboxed and can't interfere with the kind of the host browser runtime.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a post message style thing again as well, more web worker oriented, I think, in a security model as well. I'm going to butcher this as well, but yeah, it's been ages since I've kind of gone in to have a look. But yeah, I think the idea is that it's that single purpose processing kind of approach, and if you've provided a content path or a hook path to be able to let it talk back and forth to your application, it would really be through that channel. So I think there's some options there as well, but I guess that, again, for the audience's benefit and for the benefit of that question, it's probably going to be the case of is that what you need? Are you looking for just adding on core functionality and then it kind of blends away, it just becomes invisible at that point? What are you trying to do? I think if we're talking about UI apps, Adam, you'd probably say that it's more like if you're trying to extend, provide a toolkit in a specific part of your app or something like that, it's gonna, you're ultimately going to end up loading some sort of HTML and JS or something like that. Yeah. And you'll end up being in that non-sandbox space again. So yeah, it probably has a myriad of different overlaps, right?
Yeah, but that's actually really interesting to hear, and I'll be checking out more WebAssembly, given I'm all about that sandbox. So
fantastic. This one's good. I think we've touched on this as well before in our conversations. About the question is, how do you share your code to avoid bloat? What about common dependencies, right? So we touched on a couple of different things, like Webpack's obviously got the ability to share dependencies. Do you want to expand on any of this for the question's sake?
Yeah. So the main way to do this, if I understand the question correctly, is to basically have a single library that everyone is forced to use. So if you do implement UI based plugins and you use an iframe, you will find that people use whatever UI framework they want. And so now you have a plugin written in Vue, another one written in React, and so on and so forth. And your user is loading many times the amount of code that they usually would just to launch your application. And if you have all of those displaying in the same frame, it's extremely bloated at that point. So what I would recommend is to either recommend a single UI framework or enforce it. The absolute extreme version of this is to just let them define a bunch of commands that ultimately draw on a canvas.
Yeah.
Just avoid the entire web, but obviously don't do that. And yeah, do provide a single, and this is the thing that I think the Webpack modules have helped with is it's a nice way, and it basically makes it very easy to not have to load the framework twice, which would happen with an iframe. But at the end of the day, I don't think it's a big deal, because your user might have 10 tabs open, and each tab is a different UI framework. So that's already happening.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's extremely hard to try and force everyone to use the same framework. But that's the approach that I've seen a lot of the other apps use. Is basically providing hooks, and in order to draw, yes, you can use any JavaScript framework, but it's going to be a lot nicer, because if you do use our hooks, which work with this specific framework, because that's the only thing that we publicly publish. So yeah, that's I think that's the general approach that I've seen.
Yeah. And in memory dependency injection and things like that, depending on the kind of loader style approach you take, you can kind of mimic that or control that, or make sure that you're patching against the same common variables there in JavaScript. So it offers a lot of that extensibility as well, without even needing to jump on the specific Webpack bandwagon. There's other loaders that do that as well, for sort of module federation and micro front ends and things like that as well. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of interesting aspects there to consider. And again, like you said, these are talks in themselves, so they're probably outside of the path of the course that's here. That's right. We're very branched. There's two left. Are there existing community tools for versioning or having loaders for plugin style systems? So I guess, are there any out of the box kind of community tools that you see that are, you're really lending to these plugin style systems outside of, I guess, what you've already put on the screen there?
I tried to look for these actually, and what came up were plugin engines, but I could not find anything that's nice enough in JavaScript world. But I mean, it could be out there. I can't imagine. There's so many applications that implement extensions. I can't imagine one of them hasn't open sourced all of their shared extension code. But I think that's if you find any, that's where you're gonna find it. But at the same time, because it's so specific to what you're doing. Although the loading part is not very, it is going to be, but again, you might not want to have a whole marketplace and all that. So yeah, it's very case by case, I think.
Yeah, so ultimately, like if you're dealing with a single page app or something like that, you're still doing dependency injection, like runtime injection, patching in a function and calling it. But yeah, I think it comes down to restriction, right? Like we can connect two apps and get them to run code arbitrarily, but that's actually harder than to stop it or control it or standardize specific abilities from that point. It's going to be a lot harder. So yeah, I think that's where I think that the tooling and the libraries would start to come in about, how do you control, or how do you sort of set limits on, what you can do today on the web, like, which is unlimited, right? You can go and pull in anything, any resource from anywhere and run it. So those are the kinds of things that you're facing when you're trying to determine a plugin style environment. Cool beans. This one again is a little bit along the same degree, same lines. So it says, by what degree is namespacing going to be enough to sandbox versus actual in-memory separation?
Yeah, that's
what would you say?
Yeah, that I would say that well, for JavaScript, I think I think because it's a high level language, again, I'm not a security expert on these things, but I mean, there's certainly been stuff like Markdown Inspector and all that. But if you're running code in an iframe and it's running in the same thread, I mean, there could be things there. And even if you're running in a separate thread, you're just relying on the OS or browser sandboxing guarantees. And I mean, again, it depends on the user's browser. So I know Chrome has much better sandboxing than Firefox. I don't have any data to back that, but I read it somewhere. You're just, when you're using these web-based solutions, you're just depending on someone else's implementation. And at the end of the day, unless you have a really locked down domain-specific language, you're just running someone else's code. There's no telling what could happen. There's vulnerabilities everywhere. You're doing the bare minimum that you can do, I think.
Yeah. So you're starting to provide application specific NPM and NPM audit, like going and auditing, vetting your actual modules that you're kind of bringing in from everywhere else. So yeah, I think instead of trying to replicate the JS ecosystem for yourself, as long as you target your domain or your abilities that you're trying to provide in your application as a plugin style system are smaller, or you're really just trying to provide a window space inside your app to provide additional functionality, like with your micro front-end approaches or your iframe approaches or anything that you're trying to do there, and just exposing, I guess, the only abilities that they can call there, outside of their own space. They can't access the global space or data that you, from your own application, have put in there. So then, as long as there's some sort of separation, that you kind of need a measure of your namespacing and your in memory sort of separations, or even, like you said, go into a different tech, looking at WASM, looking at your web workers or other specific communication restricted channels and things like that as well. So I think what you've raised before kind of tends to bring it to the fore.
Yeah, there's so much. Like I remember reading about this vulnerability where someone could just use CSS to look at a link's color to know if you visited it, and then just inject a bunch of links, and they can basically tell your browser history. And there's, I feel like there's always going to be things like that. But I do want to check out the WebAssembly route, because if you can really just execute a bunch of code in a sandbox way and just communicate with it, that could be really promising, I think. So
you could even be writing a loader with WebAssembly. It could be your plugin system. It could be the police, right? You could set up some hooks there and
maybe
have it be the police.
A framework next time.
Hey, we're happy to do it. That'd be great to see next time as well. So watch this space, everyone. That'll be the way going forward here. Well, good, and that's it for the questions. Did you want to follow up with anything specific, or we'll otherwise we'll throw to our exit slide and keep going?
No, I'm all good. Thanks, Kevin, and thanks, Ash, for the incredibly useful tool. And hopefully see you next time.
Absolutely. Thanks very much, folks, and thank you, Adam, and absolutely huge virtual round of applause there. We got to make sure that you guys are recognized for coming forward, helping us out, and showcasing some cool info to Brisbane and the world and in our live stream stage. Thanks very much for volunteering this and showing everyone that it can be a small idea that really becomes an extremely useful piece of content to everyone. I'm going to throw my exit slide up here and say a quick goodbye to everyone and provide a couple of links to everyone who is keen to know them. Hopefully that starts coming through for everyone there as well. Again, thank you very much to our speakers. Thank you very much to everyone who's joined us live. It's always much better to get a lot of nice feedback, questions, some activity on the chat. I appreciate you all, and it's always good to be able to run these things. And like I said, we will be trying and do this in person again, right? It's Brisbane JavaScript, so we'll hang out in Brisbane together and have a bunch of pizza and have some drinks and do some great presentations. We'll need to try and build up an amount of speakers first, right? We'll try and build up a few different months worth of speakers, guarantee that we've got some content that people can come to. They know that what they're leaving their cozy homes for. As Ash said, it's cold outside, so trying to get out of our cozy little places and come to a meetup is sometimes difficult, especially in the post-COVID world. If you're still working from home, it's definitely one of those things that you just feel like is a bit of a tougher ask sometimes. But getting out there in the community and enjoying the networking time and the pizza is definitely cool. And we really look forward to being able to have everyone back as well. So yeah, watch that space. Let us know if you've got any questions or any feedback about that. I'm happy to talk to folks who are keen to see this happen, and maybe folks want to volunteer themselves for handling some of the logistics or just being on site for a day or two, and those kinds of things would be really, really useful. Also, we've heard from different folks, like different companies around Brisbane. They've got venues and they're keen to sort of have us host there as well. We're really enjoying the support that Brisbane's got there as well. So and if you and your company or any of your colleagues are keen to throw up a talk for BrisJS, that's actually going to be what makes sure that we can seal the deal. We've got dedicated folks who are going to come through. We'll make sure that we can if you build it, then they will come, and we can go on that principle for our actual in-person events as well. And yeah, that's I'm waffling on at this point. And these are all the links that you're used to seeing. You can get in touch with me through at KevDesign or through the Twitter at BrisJS. Otherwise, BrisJS.org, as I mentioned before, has a couple of other links and some of the links through to GitHub and other things as well. You can go and review the Slido again. Leave us some feedback there as well. I'll click the feedback button. There's a poll that I'm going to activate right now. I'm going to have just an open text poll. If you've got any feedback and or ideas on how we can improve live streams as well, or the in-person events, if you've been to those that we hosted back in the before days, as they call it, please let me know. And otherwise I'm happy to hear from you, and we'll see you at the next one. So I really appreciate everyone's time. And I'll leave this slide up for a couple more seconds, but I'll catch you all later. Thanks very much.